let's talk mounted combat in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It's something that I feel like either comes up a lot or doesn't come up at all, depending on the makeup of your party, whether they want to invest in mounts, and possibly if you have a paladin or some other class that gives you access to some sort of pet type mechanic. So if you want to see what my thoughts are and how mounted combat actually works, stay tuned. Someone suggested for my intro bit that maybe I describe a homebrew magic item since I've been struggling. So I'll give you one of my mounted combat related magic items, which is the battle saddle. This was something I gave to one of my paladin players, and while you put this on your mount, it gave you the benefits of the mounted combatant feat as long as the mount was wearing it. It was non-attunement, and I think I made it an uncommon or rare magic item. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and let's jump into D&D Beyond. So I have a couple of different tabs open over here, because originally this was brought on by the chariot information provided in Mythic Odysseys of Theros. And I said, I wonder where there are, about chariot rules. And a lot of people were like, they're in the mounted combat section of, combat in the player's handbook. And that was I was confused. A lot of people said to look there, and I'll talk about it, and then we'll look at chariots, and I'll explain the whole thing. So, a willing creature that is at least one size larger than you, that has the appropriate anatomy, can serve as a mount. So, keep that in mind. It's going to be, if you're small, it's got to be medium. If you're medium, it's got to be large, and so on. So, once during your movement on your turn, you can mount a creature that is within 5 feet of you or dismount that creature. Doing so costs half of your movement speed. An amount of movement equal to half your speed. Yeah, so that's something I feel like often gets overlooked, in that, like, if you have 30 feet of movement to climb onto a horse, it's going to cost you 15 feet of your movement to do so, and to dismount from said horse will cost you 15 feet of movement. And it actually, I didn't even read the next line as an example stating that, but that's what it is. But it says, therefore, you can't mount if you don't have 15 feet of movement. So it's not half of the movement speed you have left, it's half of your total movement. If an effect moves your mount against its will while you're on it, you must succeed on a DC 10 dexterity saving throw or fall off the mount, landing prone within a space within 5 feet of it. If you're knocked prone while mounted, you must make the same saving throw. If your mount is knocked prone, you can use your reaction to dismount as it falls and land on your feet. Otherwise, you are dismounted and fall prone in a space within 5 feet of it. And then kind of the big section here, the most important part, is controlling a mount in combat. That says you have two options. You can either control the mount or allow it to act independently. It says intelligent creatures such as dragons act independently, and that we'll touch on that in a sec. So you can control a mount only if it has been trained to accept a rider, right? If you jump on the back of a wild bear, you're not gonna be able to ride it into combat. Domesticated horses, donkeys, and similar creatures are assumed to have such training. The initiative of a controlled mount changes to match yours when you mount it. If you move, it moves as you direct it, and it only has three action options: dash, disengage, and dodge. A controlled mount can move and act even on the turn that you mount it. So if you get on this mount, you could then use your mount's action to dash. An independent mount retains its place in the initiative order. Bearing a rider puts no restriction on the actions the mount can take, and it moves and acts as it wishes. You might flee from combat, rush to attack, and devour a badly injured foe, or otherwise act against your wishes. In either case, if the mount provokes an attack of opportunity while you're on it, the attacker can target you or the mount. So, right, if you ride into combat on a mount and then ride away, they can choose to attack you or the mount. Something they don't go over here is if the mount is forced to make... It says if you make a dexterity saving throw or fall off the mount, but what if your mount makes like someone casts a fireball at you and you're mounted? Does your mount make the dexterity saving throw? And then if they succeed, do you succeed because you're riding them and they dodge it? Or do you and the mount make separate dexterity saving throws? And how do you theoretically dodge the fireball while mounted on said mount and it fails? So how does that work? Or like, do you have to jump off of it to make a separate dexterity saving throw? Because I've seen this come up actually quite a bit as someone who plays a paladin fairly often. It comes down to, if my mount has a better dexterity than me, in theory, I want to have my mount make the save, and then I'll just come along for the ride and maybe get half damage on that saving throw. But I could also see a more than reasonable expectation to say I want to make a dexterity saving throw separate from the mount, and that would dismount me if I were to do so. So really, unfortunately, there's not a lot of rules regarding mounted combat. There's a lot, really, it's mounting and dismounting is half your movement. If it moves moves your mount against its will while you're on it, you need to make a save to not fall off. If your mount is knocked prone, you can use your reaction to dismount and land on your feet. Otherwise, you're also knocked prone. And then there's basically just the rules on movement. If it's a domesticated creature that you control, you can either have it dash, disengage, or dodge, and that's it. And if it's independent, it does whatever it wants or what the DM tells you that it wants. And then if you provoke an attack of opportunity while on a mount, the attacker gets to choose. So I went and checked the equipment section here just on mounts and vehicles. It doesn't really give us any information on different vehicles. It lists them and it lists their price and weight, but nothing too much there. I figured we could also look at the mounted combatant feat, because that's a way to alter mounted combat. So if you're mounted and aren't incapacitated, you gain the following benefits. You have advantage on melee attack rolls against any unmounted creature that is smaller than your mount. So obviously in this instance, the larger your mount, the better off you are. You can force an attack targeted at your mount to target you instead. So they're attacking my horse, I want them to attack me, and that may have better benefits depending on how things are going. And then if your mount is subject to an effect that allows it to make a dexterity saving throw to only take half, it takes no damage if it succeeds on the saving throw and only half if it fails. So it's basically giving the mount evasion. More to the point of my question from before, if I'm riding my mount, and I have mounted combatant, whether it be, I have it from the feet, if you were to use that battle saddle magic item I described at the beginning, something like that, my mount now has evasion. If I'm riding my mount and someone drops a fireball on us and my mount dodges out of the way with this extra bonus and takes no damage at all, do I still have to make a saving throw and I take the damage? I don't have this unique ability, but I'm technically moving with the mount because I'm riding on it. There may be a ruling on this in the Sage advice, and maybe if I remember, I'll look it up before we end the video, but I'm curious what your thoughts are at this current point. So we went over our rules, so then if we go and look in Theros at the chariot, it says chariots and creatures pulling them work like controlled mounts as described there. So they're controlled, which means they can only take the dash, disengage, or dodge action. But they gain the following benefits. Mounting or dismounting a chariot costs you 5 feet of movement rather than half your movement speed. Being mounted on a chariot grants you half cover due to the high sides, which is a +2 to your AC and a +2 to dex saves. A chariot's speed is equal to the speed of the slowest creature pulling it. And if multiple creatures are pulling the chariot, they all act on the same initiative and they must take the same action on their turn. So that really kind of covers that. So chariots, they don't result really too much to reference in the player's handbook. Most of the rules for chariots are just contained here in Mythic Odysseys of Theros. The only other thing I thought worth mentioning is there's two other things, I guess. The Cavalier Fighter has some adjustments to mounted combat. You have advantage on saving throws to avoid falling off your mount. And if you fall off your mount and descend no more than 10 feet, you can choose to land on your feet. And dismounting or mounting a creature only costs you 5 feet of movement if you're a Cavalier at level 3. Hold the line. I'm trying to see if there's anything here. Let's just look up mount related. Oops. Man, that went all over the place. Mount. Mounted combat. Oh, okay. 7th level. You fend off strikes directed at you, your mount, or other creatures nearby. If you or any creature within 5 feet of you hits you with an attack roll, you can roll a d8 if you're wielding a melee weapon. Roll the die, add the number rolled to the target's AC. If the attack still hits, the target has resistance to the against the attack's damage. So that plus mounted combatant can make your mount really, really survivable. And then at 15, you get Ferocious Charger. You can run down your foes whether you're mounted or not. If you move at least 10 feet in a straight line right before attacking a creature and hit it with an attack, they must make a strength saving throw or be knocked prone. So that could be your mount does the movement. And something to consider, if you can get access to a mount that works like that, like a warhorse has a 60-foot movement speed, and it can only take the dash action, a dash, disengage, or hide. If it takes the dash action, you now have 120 feet of movement without you actually using your move. You could, in theory, then dismount that creature using half of your movement speed and then move the remaining amount of your movement speed to get wherever you need to go. Another common thing to do is to have your mount move its full distance, and then if you have some sort of teleportation magic, like say a Misty Step, you can leave the mount back as a bonus action without using any of your movement because the teleportation is not dismounting. This was something I used to use relatively frequently as a paladin. Oath of the Ancients Paladin specifically gets you access to Misty Step, so I would have my mount move 120 feet. I would Misty Step 30 feet off of the mount, and then I still had my full 30 feet of movement and then another 30 feet if I needed to dash. So I could close a sizable distance in a very short period of time. And the last thing to consider before we close out mounted combat is the idea of the Find Steed spell, and Find Greater Steed, but we'll just use Find Steed as an example. So you summon a spirit that assumes the form of an unusually intelligent, strong, and loyal steed, creating a long-lasting bond with it. Appearing in an unoccupied space within range, you make a steed of some kind. It has the statistics of its chosen form, has a different type. If it has an intelligence of 5 or less, its intelligence becomes 6, and it gains the ability to understand one language of your choice that you can speak. So in theory, I guess this makes it now an intelligent mount. Per these original rules, it would now have its own place in the initiative order, and it would do whatever it wants. But it's a creature created by your spell and your magic, but it is intelligent, so it sort of breaks this whole dichotomy, right? So it's intelligent, therefore it says it takes its own initiative and it acts on its own, but it is under your control because you literally manifested this thing into existence. So does it fall under controlled mount because you can control it? But if it's intelligent, then it gains access to things that aren't just dash, disengage, or dodge. It gets access to all the other actions. So that's kind of where Find Steed falls, kind of in the middle. And it says it serves you as a mount both in and out of combat, and you have an instinctive bond that allows you to fight as a seamless fighting unit. That's also something that gets stretched depending on how your DM views it. What is a seamless fighting unit? Is that we work in unison and we can attack together? Meaning, like if I have a warhorse and it rides in, can I have it make a hoof attack and then me still attack as well? While mounted, any spell you cast on yourself, it's also shared with the mount. And then again, when it drops to 0 hit points, it disappears. When it's within 1 mile of you, you can communicate with it telepathically. And that's pretty much it. So Find Steed's kind of the weird outlier in the mounted combat section. So the way I've always run it is it's essentially, I'm not going to call it a second character, but like I treat it as like this warhorse is under your control because it's literally made from your magic, but it's intelligent and you're working as a seamless fighting unit. And to me, that means it can do whatever it needs to do. So if it's a warhorse, you can see right here, it's got 60 feet of movement, but it also has trampling charge and a hoof attack, or hooves attack. So I would rule that you could ride on your mount, have it move 60 feet, potentially have it use its trampling charge, and then make a hooves attack. And that's, separate from all of your moves. That's just it using its turn. I also always have a steed go on the same turn as the paladin because it's just so much easier to have it just all happen at the same time. But in theory, if it falls under the fact that it may be an intelligent creature, it's supposed to get its own initiative order, which is really annoying if you're like, I'm literally riding this creature that I made from my own magic, but I have to wait 3 turns in the initiative order to tell it to ride forward, so now I need to ready an action. So I usually always combine the steed and the paladin's turn. But I'm curious, like I said, maybe there's a ruling on the Sage Advice somewhere that tells you exactly how to go about this, and I'm just not up to speed on that because I haven't looked it up. But I'm curious what your thoughts are and how you roll it at your own table. We can pull up the Sage Advice Compendium right here, and we can see if there is anything about mounted combatant. There is not. So that answers that. Because I was hoping to see, like, if you make a saving throw, or if the mount makes a saving throw, what happens? Is there anything on mounted combat? Oh, what's the amount? Oh, amount. Yeah, there's not really anything. It's all about... The only question was regarding the charger feat. So, all right, there's no sage advice on that. So that's something I would like an answer on, as we do see abilities that allow us to have our mount succeed. But again, I still find it funny that, like, if I'm riding on a horse and my horse can dodge out of the way taking no damage from a fireball, and I literally have to move with it because I'm sitting on it and, like, strapped in, I could still take the full damage, but the thing that's literally moving me with it, even potentially against my will, takes no damage. How does that work? But let me know, how has mounted combat worked in your game? Is it something that comes up often to the point where it's frustrating? Is it something that's never come up at all because the party just uses their horses to ride from point A to point B and not actually use them in combat? Again, if you're a paladin, I feel like Find Steed and Find Greater Steed come up very, very often because they're really good spells, and then I'm assuming that means that you're going to have mounts fighting in combat. But I just wanted to go over because there's really not that many rules about it, and most of the cool, interesting rules regarding mounted combat are all tied to this chariot, which is, you know, just like a sidebar in Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which I do feel like that should be, like, eroded into the player's handbook, because chariot is listed as a thing you can buy in the player's handbook, and there are no stats or information about it anywhere until this book that literally just came out almost 6 years later. We now have rules for how chariots work. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me. And if you have not subscribed, well, it's always cool if people do that. We're approaching 40,000, which is an insane number. The channel's been under massive amounts of growth, and that's no thanks to anyone but all of you out there helping me to grow the channel and inspire me to keep making these videos as fast as I can and daily, so that you guys can have something to keep you, possibly give you a minor escape from everything that's going on out there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.